Right. So the top 20 albums of May. I start off the this column here with not so much a disclaimer, but more a thought that uh, criticism doesn't always have to be interesting, or I can't always pull inspiration out of my ass in terms of I wouldn't fake my interest in music, and I wouldn't necessarily put forth something I didn't trust and believe in. So the pickings were a little bit slim this month. So some of these are really here for more so their merit as artistic value or persistence, or you know, it's not that these were lesser albums to choose from. It's just that they don't necessarily uh, there wasn't a ton to choose from that really met that bar. So I definitely wanted 40 things to talk about. I got about 20 together, and I really stand behind about 10 or so. So the one that was just undeniably the album of the month, with that in mind, was Upal from Kostnateni. No, Kostnacheni, however you pronounce that. It is a Minneapolis-based abstract black metal project, which is this is sort of their second full length. That is a point of maturation and growth, which finds the very obscurant and wild style of the band evolving in pretty intense ways throughout this record. And I think that it not only has some strong insight into a lot of interesting intellectual pursuits, but it's actually just a great listen. It's a good black metal album to sit down with, which is entirely unconventional and just nothing like anything else you'll hear all month. So that's an obvious standout and just a real point of inspiration for me this month. So number two is Mournful Congregations, The Exuviae of Gods Part 2, which is their latest EP in a sort of a diptych of two full-length sized mini LPs, which basically just kind of give you an album's worth of Mournful Congregation, which is much appreciated. They've expanded upon the style of their last album in slightly more succinct pieces, or just honed in on the best points from that record, which was the dual guitar leads and sort of the narrative that they create. Um, Sort of more pensive, traditional doom metal braced sound, kind of those elements that have always been in there with this band, and now they're just kind of pulling it together as they uh, sift between ideas, building up towards their next LP. So this is sort of one of two interstitial releases, which amount to a full length, and it is full length quality when you mash them together. If you're a fan of their early work, there is some parity to that in style, and they basically present the re-recording of their second demo in full between part one and part two. So a lot of value there for me as a longtime fan, and I had nothing but enthusiasm for this record. Covenants of Salt is the latest mini LP from Balmog, and this is a Galician black metal band who certainly have their own unique sound brewing between their several full lengths up to this point, and now these this series of EPs, which is an anomaly outside of their full length range. So, if you're a fan of Eve, their most recent full length, you'll find that this is a little bit different. It has some different actors in there. It has some different inclusions in terms of staff, and what they've really done here is try to recreate the magic of Pillars of Salt, which was an EP back a couple of years ago, and I think they've done it in general. I don't think this is a worse record in any way. It's just a different record compared to what the first one was, where the first one was sort of emergent, constantly churning and changing its form, and this is more set into sections that read more like 3 or 4 minute songs sewn together in a meaningful way to create a narrative. So different type of storytelling, and a little bit different modus, but still along the same lines, and a good complement to the last mini LP. Bewitchment of the Dark Ages is the latest full length from Garroted, a Kansas City, Kansas based death metal band who definitely have always veered toward the side of brutal death metal. They've had a little bit of, kind of the Angel Corpse esque throttle to their sound, but still, if you're a fan of early Deeds, or if you're a fan of Nile and uh, those sorts of things. All of that kind of comes together in their sound for something that is consistently brutal, packed with riffs, and still has the heart of like early 90s death metal on the sort of brutal spectrum tapped into here. So, yeah, if you're a fan of like Trading Pieces and early Suffocation and all that, you'll still get what you want out of that. But there's also a bit of Deicide and all that in their sound too. So if you don't know the band, this is kind of their best record yet, and you should definitely go back and listen to their last two records to sort of see the progression and appreciate just how great this record is. Age of Darkness is the latest mini LP from Tombstalker, a Lexington, Kentucky-based death metal band who definitely have veered heavily more into their sort of Swedish melodic death metal side for this record. And when I say that, I mean early '90s, the kind of the original stamp on melodic death metal, where it was a little bit more sophisticated and less kind of the obvious, just plain heavy metal with growls. So otherwise, we get a little bit of kind of the bolt thrower meets dismember thing in their sound in general, with just kind of a general showing of exactly what this band is all about within about a 20-minute clip. So uh, great record, one of my favorite of the month, and one that was just one of the easiest things to recommend all month. Isak Trillium and their latest triple LP, Astral Constellations of the Magical Zodiac, is sort of unfit for consumption in a lot of ways. It's very long, it's very involved, it is aggressive, it is kind of nonstop, it's elaborate in concept, and it's just a ton of work of three very different albums all tied up together into one idea, and there's great art attached to all of it. It's this complete package that is just a huge nuke to drop on anyone in a month. And so it's hard to see the forest for the trees at first when you approach this thing. And the best thing I could say is certainly get this record and approach it with patience. Give it the time that it deserves if you're the type to spend more than 1 or 2 days with an album ever. And I think that's kind of what makes it special, is that you really do get a reward for spending time with a record like this. It just, you have to be that type of fan who really cares about what they're listening to and has an interest in obscure, sort of progressive, sort of myriad homebrewed black metal. It's a really unique thing, and I like how he's developed his sound over time. And frankly, it makes up for some of the just kind of average, just kind of putting it out kind of records that came out in the meantime. So, uh, an easy thing to recommend, but I'm not sure who. I just know that I'm certainly the type of listener who will give this album the time that it demands, because its qualities are obvious and plentiful. So. Hades is the debut full-length from Thanatomas, a Russian black metal trio who play an unhinged form of bestial black death metal, and I would say leaning towards bestial black metal and sort of the um, let's say catharsis style in general. That's a place to start. They do have like most of their work has sort of a thrashing death metal feel to it, and it definitely feels like an old school black metal band in spirit. So if you're a fan of kind of the classics of the early '90s, you'll understand what this band is all about right away. It does have that early Black Death, uncertainty to it that is really strong here, and it comes with this uniquely organic and brutal production value, this great album cover, and just a lot of great songs that are long and involved and in a certain style that I like a lot. So a lot of enthusiasm for this record. I really appreciated that I got to premiere it, and just I think it's something I've continued to listen to beyond that point. Hail the Abyss is the latest full length from Thokandra. So this is a um, Bavaria-based or just German melodic black death metal band, and I wouldn't say that this album is so different from anything else they've ever put out. I do think this band started out just as kind of an okay project from Stefan Kummer of Obscura, but he evolved it over the years to be what it is today, which is much more of a kind of a dissection worship crew, and in the best way possible. Like, not only is this a an intense and professional production, and it speaks to this melodic black metal out of Germany lately, where we get really fine production value, really inspired songwriting in a certain style, but also a little bit of modernity, a little bit more of a conversation to add in there. And I would put it alongside bands like Thrawn and Outlaw, and maybe even The Spirit too, who have something to add to that dissection-esque legacy without just repeating it over and over. So I really appreciated this record as something a little bit different, but also something very traditional, very focused, and very recognizable. So I had a good time with it, and you know that's what counts. A Pilgrimage to Nowhere is the second full length from Age of the Wolf, a sort of psychedelic doom slash sludge metal project, very much in the style of like bands like Yob, and with maybe a little heavier influence from late '90s, early 2000s Neurosis, and a little bit of early Mastodon in there too. That's kind of grabbing at a lot of the best things in a certain era of evolved sludge metal out of a certain era, and I think they do a great job with that while still representing a bit of a psychedelic doom metal format. So this album is ambitious, it is tuneful, it is kind of emergent in a lot of the storming about that it does, and it is generally more aggressive than their first record. I feel like it has a story to tell and a direction in mind, which is appreciable. So I really enjoyed this record, and definitely one of the things, like I don't return to this type of sludge metal very often, but with this record, I really found myself wanting to come back to it and re-experience it. However, It Still Moves is the latest, or actually debut full length from Spore Autumn Yuggoth, a Chile-based death doom metal band who they started out playing kind of a more standard, old school, just straightforward death doom metal sound, which now evolves into something a little bit more melodic, a little bit more textural, but also still aggressive in terms of pinning up actual death metal alongside death doom metal in a way that is tuneful. It feels kind of like they're playing with a palette of the strongest, some pretty strong taste in the classics, while kind of creating their own sound from it. It's a strong record that has it has a lot of ups and downs, and I don't mean that the quality is bad. I mean that the tone jumps up and down and kind of comes and goes in waves. So it's a very long and involved listen that will ultimately pay off if you give it the time it is due. Ooh, boastful. However you pronounce this latest Profetti record, its title is sort of a meditation on poverty, separation of classes, and it sort of has this sort of bitterness towards society in its mouth as they present what is somewhat avant-garde and but still very melodic and atmospheric style of black metal, which fans of Furia and uh, modern Polish black metal in general will probably enjoy. I had a great time with this record. I really enjoyed how it was quick, it was to the point, and it was varietal as a sort of eclectic but still cohesive uh, experience. So I don't think that it was on a lot of people's radar this month, but it certainly should be because it is one of the just something that I came back to pretty often and worked really well on repeat. Innocuous Abyss is the second full length from Titan, a Netherlands-based progressive slash dissonant black metal solo act, which follows the first album pretty quickly with a more inspired, more involved, and sort of unique black metal record, which characterizes a lot of nihilistic and existential literature and history, which makes for some pretty interesting songs. It's sort of the sort of thing where if you're a fan of like Deathspell Omega and Dot Heimskard, you'll appreciate everything this band does. And that's pretty, pretty straightforward in terms of if you like that thing, you will like this thing. But I think this project has a lot of potential in that I see a personality here that could be expanded upon and could easily become its own thing in truth, whereas this is a strong characterization that is not so much quickly built, but certainly obsessed over to the point where it's become this fine and rich experience, which I think fans of modern and dissonant black metal will instantly appreciate, whereas the avant-garde black metal fan will really be the mark for this kind of thing. So definitely check that out if that's you.
I despise her. Should I kill her?
Iniquitous Barbaric Synthesis is the latest full length from Impetuous Ritual. And, if you know what this band sounds like, well, they still sound like that. This is maybe a better recording. It is, like I say in the review, it's much more in line with what Portal kind of brought with their last record, where the sound design was a little bit different. It was clearer but obscured, and there was a lot of similarly miserable progressions and droning brutality on this that is both fully related to what they've done in the past, but also maybe just a little bit more of a return to the real brutality of their first record in some sense. So I like this record. Some people had a problem with what I had to say about it. I'm not sure why, but it is great and it is worth remembering and picking up. Usnea is a Portland-based sludge slash doom metal slash funeral metal slash death metal band who present probably one of their more succinct and just coherently presented full lengths to date with Bathed in Light. This is a deeply atmospheric sort of death doom metal record at heart. It's got a little bit of sludge and black metal in its influences, and generally it feels like they've been able to sort of free themselves from a lot of the longer form constructs that sort of defined their early period, and now they're working with a little bit more succinct and but still elaborate pieces on this record. Um, I wouldn't say that this is a very memorable record, but it definitely is for its experience and for its atmospheric qualities and sort of just the intense sound design. Just it's a huge sounding record that's worth grabbing. Even Fall of the Apocalypse is, this is the second full length from Ascended Dead, and it's been a long time coming. So basically, this was sort of a sort of band where it's like you could tell that old school death metal and death thrash metal was where they had started in a lot of ways, and that bestial black death metal and just the inherent aggressive, unleashed feeling of bestial death metal really is what drives this sound, which is, it's still 80s death metal at heart. It's not quite thrashing in the same way, and it's not quite war metal either. So it's kind of that strong gray area where just a few bands exist where they still have riffs. They're still a death metal band, but they bring the chaos in general. So it's kind of it's the sort of thing where like induction really matters and immersion really matters. So if you kind of have to sit with a record for this like this a couple of times to really see where the details really matter, and otherwise a couple of things are a little bit different here, but they really just bring back and refine what they did before in an appreciable way. The latest full length from Terrifier, which is a Canadian thrash metal band. Trample the Weak, Devour the Dead is not pizza thrash. I know that it has a very colorful album art and all that, but this is a very aggressive, riff-oriented band from sort of, I think, the Victoria or Vancouver area, where they've got a little bit more of a raw sound on this record. They've got a little bit more of a focus on just percussive and aggressive riffs, and they've cut back on some of the more uh, neoclassical kind of guitar shredding that they did on the first record or the last record. And now we get something that is just, it's obviously a modern thrash metal band, but not one that leans into mosh metal or whatever. This is just again, it's just a riff record, and I really liked it a lot. I gave it a very high recommendation. I haven't found that I've returned to it as much as I thought I would, but this is still just a style of music that I love, and this is a great record that I'll be, hopefully return to a little bit more before the end of the year. Black Royal Spiritism Io Sino Dia Gracia is the first full length from Ruim, which is a solo. Well, it's a duo with a current live member of Aggressor on drums, and most of the songs are written and sort of spearheaded by Blasphemer, who you'll know from Ara Noir, 2000's Mayhem, and Ultimus. Now, this record is not quite full-on avant-garde. It's not quite full-on black thrash. It's not entirely occult black metal, and it doesn't fully realize a lot of the style that he developed in Mayhem. So it's all of those things, and all of it is really good. It's not the most memorable thing because it is so varietal in that sense. It is a flow-based, sort of aggressive and variously atmospheric experience, which is definitely a ride, and it's definitely like an incredibly fine work, which fans of Absu and his other work will appreciate. But it just isn't quite memorable. So, number 17 out of 20 might seem low, but I think it's because this sort of record takes time to appreciate. It takes seeing what I come back to over time, and seeing where it hits and where it doesn't. Where 2 or 3 weeks just isn't enough time with such a density of ideas and meaning attached to it. So it is just a recommendation, though. So check it out. I think if you're looking for kind of riffs and just high quality composition, this is a great place to go this month. So, Phlebotomized is a Netherlands-based kind of progressive death metal, death doom, and kind of a sort of 90s entity that a lot of people remember from their 1994 debut. And they returned. They returned back in a couple years ago with uh, a record with a really bad album cover that was actually pretty good. It was more of a melodic death metal record. And that was a little bit of a surprise because they were known for more surreal and almost death doom tinged sounds early on. So Clouds of Confusion brings back the element of their self that still a little bit obsessed with Florida death metal, and um, that means that it just still, as someone who was a fan of their music a long time ago, I think that what that does is it brings back a reference that still makes sense for their sound, and it sounds much more familiar and sort of gets me in that mode. Now they're still working with a big orchestral sort of keyboard sound, which they work in a way which is closer to what Nocturnus is doing these days in its current form. But there's much more to this record than that. It is much more varietal in that sense. It does have a lot of kind of melodic metal constructs in there. So think of this as a very modern version of Phlebotomized, and with each record, it seems like they're better realizing what that means. Out for Blood is the debut full length from Shadows. This is a sort of a 80s heavy metal band from the fellow from Apostasy, a Chilean kind of cult thrash metal band. And, that isn't necessarily the best way to introduce it, because today I could probably say that if you like bands like Ghost, but not Ghost, this is kind of a better version of that in some ways for a lot of people, and it definitely takes a lot of influence from King Diamond and Merciful Fate in particular. So it's just catchy, good heavy rock influenced heavy metal, which is not really tied to the new wave of traditional heavy metal so much as it is tied to classic heavy metal. And there are just some really impressive and memorable songs here that are still stuck in my head to this day. 3-4 weeks later. So that's a lot. That's saying a lot for modern heavy metal in general. So definitely worth a recommendation. And I think it's a first shot. It's the first set of songs. It's a very short album. So I'd like to see what they do in the future. So I see this as kind of a promising release that didn't quite fully get there in terms of just all killer all the time. And finally, Loose Sutures Sadosex for Dummies is the third full length from this band, who are Sardinian. And it's a trio now. And their sound has sort of changed with every record. And this is kind of the best one yet because they've gone from focusing on kind of 70s meets 60s kind of sounds to something that is more decidedly 90s looking back to the 70s. So it is definitely a stoner rock record at heart. It's got a little bit of doom, it's got a little bit of punk, and just rock and roll in there too. But it is creepy, it's fucked up, it's a good time, it's a great record. And it's just stony enough and just catchy enough to where it feels like a step up for the band, even though it's kind of a step out in left field in a lot of ways. So something I'd really enjoyed and I thought was a good kind of return from their last album. And finally, we have some A few honorable mentions. I didn't have enough time to spend with Immortal's latest album. It's all right. It's pretty good. It's everything signature you'd want out of Immortal. Uh, I, I didn't get Sacred Outcry's Towers of Gold until more recently. It is a good power metal band with riffs, and that's something. The album is very repetitive and very long, but all of it's pretty good. So if you like one song, the whole thing is pretty solid, and I've spent some time with it and appreciated it so far. If you're interested in Compar and sort of where early pagan black metal or had sort of arisen in the Norwegian area, Heimlands for Fedrenis Tarer is a great pick, and Ocean Lord's Kingdom Cold is a record more in the kind of stoner doom, but also kind of alt rock. Yeah, I didn't record a review for it because I just didn't know what to say about it. Uh, Hex AD returns with delightful sharp edges. I think you should check this band out if you're a fan of Cathedral, and not only because they kind of sound and look like Cathedral in terms of their aesthetics, but also because it's a very good mixture of 70s progressive rock influences and real ones too, alongside traditional doom metal and sort of heavy metal influences. It's a great band and one that hasn't been appreciated very well because, or very much, because they're a little bit out there. They've gotten more elaborate with each release, and this one is the most prog rock, if you will. And otherwise, Veriluola's Cascades of Crimson Cruor presents a sort of a bestial early type of black death metal while also presenting very strong threads of melody. It's a pretty interesting release that is both obscure and specific, but if you're a fan of like more early Mortuary Drape, you'll be right at home with that record. So check that out, and there you go.